right, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Leadership Blend live podcast and the television show. Y'all know we're doing these amazing Mogulcon interviews with some of the amazing speakers that were privy to speak about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So today is our third interview, and this young lady has a very interesting position and with a very interesting company in a very interesting climate. So we're getting into diversity. So you guys know that a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, actually, we had Dr. Shelton Good, who was a friend to the show, and we were talking about diversity and inclusion, but we also know that he's a consultant. This young lady actually works for a company in a role like that. So we're really interested to really get into what it looks like, what it feels like, things of that magnitude. So without further ado, I'm gonna let her introduce herself, tell a little bit about herself, and we'll go from there.
Hey, well, yes, I'm Natonya Harbison. Thank you for having me a part of your show. I appreciate the opportunity to talk more about what I do, my passion, what I love. Just to give you a little bit about me, myself, I'm born and raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Actually, went to HBCU here in Kentucky, Frankfort, Kentucky, which is Kentucky State University. Mm-hmm. I won't tell you what year I graduated because then it'll tell my age. But
look, I'm not as young as I look, so I'm older than I look, I promise you.
Okay, yeah. So graduated there, and actually upon graduating, went to go work for MBE, which stands for a Minority Business Enterprise, that it was headquartered here in Louisville, Kentucky. They were in the automotive industry. Started out in the accounting department. I thought I liked accounting, just didn't fit my personality. So was introduced into procurement. So a lot of people may or may not know that I started with accounting, but then on to a procurement background. And procurement is just contracting, negotiating contracts with suppliers for goods and services. And so as part of being in the automotive industry and working for a minority business enterprise, we were a tier 1 supplier to Toyota, whom required you to have a 5% diversity spend with minorities. And so that's where I was introduced to supplier diversity. So one may say, well, what is supplier diversity? It's the same as a supplier. It's just a supplier that is either 51% owned and operated by someone that is a minority, which could be African-American, Asian, Indian, Hispanic, Native American. Woman-owned business, also a disabled business, veteran, LGBT, and so forth. And so when I, getting introduced into that space in procurement, it was easy for me because I was in procurement. So I actually negotiated contracts. So it was nothing for me to make sure that was inclusive of a diverse supplier of nature. And so, of course, working for an MBE, you feel like you reach your ceiling. You can only teach yourself so much. Actually standing up a procurement department, I said, well, let me go work for a larger corporation so that I can gain more knowledge. Well, when I get there, you realize that you really did know more than what corporations allow for you to do, honestly. So, and I went to go work for Humana. It's the corporation I work for, and I actually worked for in their procurement department as well, and for the medical pharmacy. So I went from automotive to medical pharmacy and to negotiate now pharmaceutical drugs. Now, these are the legal ones, okay? Okay. So, yeah. So specialty and generic drugs. So all the, for cancer or even oxycodone and different drugs of those natures. Wow. Humana has 2 mail order pharmacies. And so one in Arizona and the other in Ohio. So I got into that space in the medical pharmacy industry. And then after being on that team for 3 years, actually, the supply diversity professional, the manager, approached me because she knew my background and wanted me to support her team. Well, in that organization, supply diversity rose up through procurement. And so it was nothing for me to help support her and her team. So 3 years in corporate procurement, and then the last 4 of my years was with supply diversity, so with Humana. And then, of course, I move over to Papa Johns, and now I'm in the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion there at that organization, and heading up their supply diversity program as well. So I'll stop talking. I'll let you ask the question.
I mean, no, I look, I'm listening as we're fumbling through it. Okay. Because the next question was going to be, with all that Papa Johns has been through, why would you choose Papa Johns?
So good question. And so, as I stated, my career path has been growth for me personally, right? And so, when you being at an organization such as a Humana, who already had a pre-existing supplier diversity organization for over 17 plus years, a lot of corporations give the impression that it's a top-down approach. And in order for supplier diversity or any diversity and inclusion initiative to work or be successful, they have to be top-down. And when I say top-down, that means CEO top and his direct reports. And what I realized there after being in that team, on that team for 3 to 4 years, I felt like it was a bottom up approach. And so, what I started doing is part of our diversity, they had diversity and inclusion days, and they would, and that's where our employees, we would set up booths. And so our employees can learn more about our NRGs, which are network resource groups, and our supplier diversity team and so forth, about just the different things that they can get involved in within the organization and feel like they can bring their whole self to work. Well, I started surveying our associates to say, well, hey, do you know what supplier diversity is? And did you know this team even existed? And when 85 to 90% of the associates internally didn't even know we existed, I knew it was nothing, it wasn't a top-down approach. And it was something that I couldn't fix it from bottom up. And so no matter how hard I tried, I know that I still didn't have the power to make that change. And so, of course, you talk about Papa Johns. The reason I came to Papa Johns is because it was, honestly, truly believe it was a top-down approach. And because of what happened, they had to move fast in a way where they created that diversity and inclusion team. So as you heard, I was part of supplier diversity and procurement, which rolled up into your operations, right? And so as far as the team that I'm on now, it's the diversity, equity, and inclusion team. So it's more geared towards your internal focus, internal diversity, and so forth. But before I got interviewed, I didn't know supplier diversity was actually going to be a component of it. I just knew that I did have some experience in participating in the inclusion and diversity days at Humana, that I wanted to maybe focus on more of an internal focus, because you don't see people who look like us at the top or in executive management roles. And so I actually applied for the job. And it's interestingly enough, I didn't change my resume because I didn't have a whole lot of experience, but hey, it was where I was supposed to be. And so again, my reasoning for moving over was because I knew that they had to make this initiative work. And because of that, I knew it was going to be a top-down approach. And it was. It actually, the CEO at the time, it was a top-down approach. It was nothing for me to come in and establish policy immediately and have the CEO commitment letter and having our direct supply chain be supportive and already include me in part of their 7-step procurement process and so forth. So, I actually can say that, for my experience in the 2 years, that they really are what they say they are in regards to supporting diversity and inclusion. So that was my reasoning coming into an organization, because I was able to stand it up on my own and not just be a part of something that was already pre-existing, and just, if it wasn't supported by the top, that I wasn't going to have the support. It was never going to go anywhere. It was going to be just the status quo. And so coming here, it has allowed me to get the word out about a Papa Johns and the great things that they are doing within communities, internally, and within their supply chain. So.
Okay, so when we talk about, because I like to get down to brass tacks to make things plain for people.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
When we talk about suppliers, we'll talk about Papa Johns. So we're talking about the people that bring the marinara sauce, the people that provide the cheese. And these are typically third-party companies that submit bids and things of that magnitude. So when we talk about diversity in these fields, this has been a conversation, especially with government contracting, that smaller minority companies aren't getting these big, high-level contracts. So how does that work with you? Like, how do you make sure that these contracts are being divvied up between minority companies and not just other types of companies?
Oh, you broke up a little bit on the end. I didn't get to hear it. How do I make sure what?
How do you make sure that these contracts are distributed evenly and fairly amongst the suppliers?
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, easy. So as I stated, supplier diversity was nothing that existed in Papa Johns. So you have to imagine where I had to start, and that was from the bottom up. So that means establishing and understanding what our current supply chain looks like and understanding what our baseline was. And for a company that did not report or even know or even have the right flags in their system to understand their supply base, you know, it was a manual process for me through an Excel sheet. But as I stated early on, before even getting hired by Papa John's, they had already made the commitment, and they were already corporate members of NMSDC, which is the National Minority Supplier Development Council, and WeBank. So that was easy, that part. And then, as I stated, also is with our direct supply chain. So everything that goes on the pizza and out the door. So that, like you say, the marinara sauces, the sausages, and bacon and pepperoni and so forth. That they actually had already include. It was nothing. I think within maybe 2 weeks of me being there, we met. They liked what I talked about. They loved. They wanted the opportunity. They just never knew it existed. So you can't fault people for not knowing it existed. It's not intentional. It's just unintentional. So because no one's ever talked to them about supplier diversity. So they asked me, what do they need to do? And so what that looked like is I became part of their procurement process. And like I said, it's a 7-step procurement process. And so, you know, whenever they have a calendar of events, which is their RFPs, the request for proposals or quotes, or however you call them. And with every RFP, actually, whenever they are submitting it out the door, so which is inclusive of their statement of work, so whatever it is that they need, they actually submit it to me to actually identify diverse suppliers that can perform, that could provide that good or perform a service. And so that is, I call that 100% good faith effort. And so, and within my first year, yes, I was getting the notifications. I actually got a calendar of when their RFPs or contracts were ending. So I could actually either go ahead and get suppliers in the pipeline to be able to be prepared to submit and respond to RFPs, or I had to identify them immediately. Now, the gap there was, although as I stated, they never knew what supply diversity is. And you got to think this is a company that has been around for over 30 to 35 years. And so used to a specific supplier providing you a product because you're comfortable with them and it's safe for you. So although you're beating them up every year over year for cost savings and getting those cost savings, no one else will have that opportunity because they don't have that relationship. And so you can imagine it was hard to even introduce a diverse supplier because one, you know, you're a diverse supplier. The other negatives behind, you know, you can't, you know, what I hear is they can't service on a national level. No, not true. They can't meet economies of scale. No, not true. They can't meet our volume demands, our capacity. No, not true. And so that education factor had to be a part of it as well. And so again, we've grown in the last 2 years. And I wanted to debrief with my direct supply chain to understand because, you know, I've gotten things, well, there are not many Black or diverse. I wouldn't just say Black, because diversity is everything I stated, which is LGBT, women, minority, the veteran, and so forth, that are farmers. They can't provide produce. No, not true. How do you know that? You never really look. So, and actually, you know, that was a top-down comment, you know, and so it was the educational piece that I had to teach individuals and actually find and identify suppliers that could supply us with that. So again, it's the 100% good faith. And then also my relationship with the food is the Food, Beverage, and Industry Group. And so this was a group that came out of NMSDC, and I love this group. So it's all of my peers that are at Starbucks, Kellogg's, Nestle, Sodexo, Denny's, Pepsi, Coke. And so we have this email chain in this group, and it's actually a 501c3 we've established. And so we share suppliers back and forth. And so what my next year, to get more confidence in my buyers and my direct supply chain, I had to say, well, hey, do you all have a supplier that can provide X, Y, and Z? Here are the demands. Here's what the statement of work looks like. And as they provide me information back, I would share with my supply chain, this is the supplier. The supplier came by way of a Starbucks. Now, of course, Starbucks is on the order of a Papa Johns that has multiple franchises in multiple stores. So then they got comfortable with the supplier that they were being suggested. And so I will say, and I'm excited to say that through that relationship with that group, we've awarded 4 contracts to diverse suppliers for our seasoning, meatball seasoning, our packaging for our garlic knots, and our soy oil for our, like, deep frying of our wings and so forth. So I'm excited about that relationship.
So I guess that's the next question is a little while ago, Wells Fargo, I think the CEO stood up and said that there's a shortage of Black talent, things of that magnitude. So in this pipeline, if there's not enough minorities or diverse vendors, is there a call that goes out? Is anybody going, I mean, outside of you, if you wasn't there, is there a call that goes out to say, hey, we're looking for XYZ, or do they just kind of roll along and just keep doing what they're doing, and it's not really a focal point?
So, you know, in the cases for me, because, you know, like I said, you know, direct supply chain is the hardest because you still have indirect procurement too. So office supplies, promotional goods, contingent labor, that, you know, you have that side of the house too. So, you know, I'm just speaking as far as the direct, but you have your indirect procurement as well. So let's go back to your question in regards to the direct. If there is a call out, and like I said, that supplier doesn't exist, no, there's a reach out, like I said, to those other corporations just to see, well, have you seen any suppliers that, you know, provide XYZ? And then again, go back to my statement about our corporate membership with NMSDC and WeBank. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of suppliers that are certified through their organizations. And indeed, in order for us to even count or spend for a diverse supplier, a supplier has to be certified through these organizations. And so each one of those organizations actually supply a database. So not only am I utilizing just the food and beverage industry group to search for suppliers, I'm utilizing our partnership with these organizations to say, hey, I'll search on their database if there is, you know, for diverse suppliers. And if not, I'll reach out to our point of contact and say, hey, my keyword search is not bringing up these suppliers. Are you aware of any that I may just be missing and not typing in the right wording to identify suppliers? Then if that is wrong, you know, currently what Papa Johns has done, and, you know, I talked about establishing a baseline, you know, you need technology. So I've actually just established a relationship with an organization. It's called Supplier IO. And this company, it provides us with the technology to have a portal outside of just those 2 councils, but even suppliers who have self-identified themselves as diverse and may not be certified through those organizations and just don't know about it, and or that are just small, that just register as small and diverse and still not, you know, certified. So they have their relationships with local city council certifying organizations, not just the national. So that allows me to state all 50 states for suppliers. So there are means and access to identify suppliers. And if there isn't, it's just there isn't. So it's not you just stop where it is, you know, in the first, if I don't find it this year, I'll keep searching because I know at some point that contract will come up and I'll try to put someone in that pipeline for the next year, for the following year.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, this notion of diversity, this is what we got into with Dr. Good. It was at one point, and because we're African American, at one point, when you said the word minority, it meant Black folks, long time ago, Black folks.
Yeah.
And then we got into diversity. So now we have all these different factions that kind of get crammed under diversity. Do you think at some point, and this is just, I just asked you in general, do you think at some point we're going to have to pull these things, pull this word diversity apart and say, okay, look, we're specifically talking about African-American companies. We're specifically talking about LGBT companies and not just lump them all together so that we can kind of say, oh, we're doing our diversity thing. Do you think also we have to pull those apart and actually deal with each sector individually?
Actually, we do. Most corporations do. So I'll give an example. Like I said, you know, we only, when we speak outwardly about the word diversity, it's just, we're just lumping it. But internally, there are metrics that measure them individually. So you have your African-American spend, you have your woman spend, you have your LGBT, you have your Asian and Indian spend. So, and actually most people actually create goals towards each spend, you know, specifically to direct their spend to specific groups. of minority individuals. So let me give you an example of Pepsi, because we had a executive insight series where I wanted to educate my executive and the CEO on supplier diversity, for example. And so I had Pepsi, because they are a partner to Papa Johns, so we sell Pepsi products. I had their supplier diversity professional come in and talk to us. And in lieu of everything in the world now with social injustice, they have to, with the Black Lives Matter, if you look on their webpage, their CEO has specifically called out $350 million directly spent with Black-owned businesses. So you have corporations and organizations that have a directive to say, hey, our percentage in this category is doing good, but we need to increase our spend here. So this is where our efforts need to be more on Black specifically, or Hispanic specifically, or Asian. So yes, externally you don't hear it, but internally it is being measured. And there are specific goals to measure the spend. And even for instance, even with not, because I know we're talking more supplier diversity, and I am part of the diversity, equity, and inclusion team. So it's our internal associates. Well, we measure that as well, as far as who's at what level of management or leadership, what their ethnicity is and so forth. So that is being tracked and measured internally as well. It's just that we don't speak about those.
Okay.
So we just together. Yeah.
That's probably internally. So when you say measured, is that solely like quotas and stuff, or is there other types of things that they use to make sure that is there another metric that they use to make sure they meet these goals, or is it just like quotas?
No, it's just, so for instance, are you speaking of like for say internal, say for instance,
let's say
if we're hiring an individual. Say it again.
Yeah, we'll say internal. Let's say internally.
Okay, so for internal, just like you'll have a director from your HR say, so going for any director above position, we got to make sure that it's inclusive of 2 or 3 minorities, and not just because you're you don't get the job because you're just in a minority. You still have to be qualified, but we set specific quotas. Well, I wouldn't say a quota, but a specific rules or goals to say that if it's a director or a higher level role that we're interviewing for, there has to be so many diverse individuals that are being interviewed or poured in for an interview for that. So those are the type of metrics there. And then, because I wouldn't say quota, it's not like a quota we have to meet, because you don't get the job just because you're Black, or you don't get you don't get the contract just because you're a minority. I always tell my minorities, suppliers, actually come to us and talk to us about what your core competency is, what you're good at doing, and talk about your quality and customer service, and then say yes. And as an added bonus, oh, I am a diverse supplier. So don't lead with diversity, lead with what your qualifications are and say this is the added bonus. So I wouldn't say it's a quota. It's just, it's metrics. You set goals. I would say goals to say that we want to meet it, and we find every way means possible to meet those goals.
Okay, so it's more like a rubric that they use to kind of make sure that they meet these things. So that was the other thing. It was like, we got to put some kind of word on it. I don't like quota, because I don't feel like quota fits human. But like a rubric.
Yeah, I don't. No, it don't. No.
Quotas doesn't really feed humans.
Yeah.
A rubric sounds pretty.
No.
That they kind of.
Oh yeah. When you look for an internship program and you meet so many criteria, yeah.
This is like a rubric. Yeah. This is a nicer word. It's a prettier word. It's a nicer word. Okay, so that was the other question that we had when we were talking. It was like, okay, well, is it enough that we interview people of color for these positions? Is there another rubric to kind of ensure that they're actually getting some of these positions and not just interviewing or being considered? Is there another rubric that they use to kind of make sure that the pipeline finishes out what it should finish out?
Mm-hmm. Right. So you're just saying not just make the effort, but you want actual people to serve.
Exactly. We want to actually see these hired positions.
Yeah. See the results. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry. But so yes, We had an individual, she's part of our IDS team. I speak for Papa John specifically. That actually, she works with our HR department. So we don't. It's illegal just to make you put what your ethnicity is. So as long as in our associate or set up in our system, if it's there, we track that. So it's Tableau. We use Tableau. It's still kind of manual. We try to automate it, but we use certain criteria within our organization to see where individuals are within the department and what levels they are at. So then that information is shared with top leadership to say, hey, this is where we stand in our diversity efforts for individuals. And so it's up to our CPO, which is our Chief People Officer, to say, well, we're lacking in this area. And so I want to make sure that we're not just interviewing, but that we're having the partnerships with the right, let's say, corporate members, or not even members, but organizations that we're bringing in top talent, right? So for instance, we're establishing a relationship with UNCF, the United Negro College Fund. And so we're creating an internship program for 2021, and I'm actually working on that, where we'll have about 5 interns. Well, you set a criteria, say you have to have at least a 2.8 GPA and 2 letters of references, and have this essay, and be this at this level of our school, and you got to participate in their leadership conference. So we are utilizing that partnership so they can identify these students and provide us with a pipeline of students. And so our goal is to, as we continue to grow this relationship, those interns will become part of our organization. And so we'll bring them back year over year, as long as we have our internship program, which develop them into and prepare them to work for a Papa John's through their internship program. So there are a lot of measures and things. And like I said, internally, we can't keep up with it. And that's why we are creating those relationships. And so, our CPO actually stated just the other day that he wants to, utilize other partnerships with other organizations, not just UNCF, but they say if there's a Hispanic, organization that can provide interns for Hispanic culture or Asian cultures and so forth, that's where we want to make sure that we're having those relationships and partnerships with those organizations.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Any advice, because we're down to our last 8 minutes, any advice that you would give to companies that are seeking to get contracts with a company like Papa John's or a major company? Any advice you would give them, somebody in that position?
Yep. So if you are a supplier and you want to do business with a Papa John's, here's what advice I will give you, or not even just a Papa John's, any corporation. Don't try to do everything. So, where I find a lot of suppliers, they'll ask you, well, what is it that you need? Because I could get it for you. No, you have core competency. You are good at whatever that one specific thing that you do. Be good at it. Don't be the end all be all for everything. That's the first. Second, you only capture a person's attention for about 15 minutes, if that. So have your capability statement, have your elevator speech. Because, they say when you reach that top floor and you get to the top of the elevator, that's all the time you have. So when you reach the top floor, if you haven't got your business through as far as what you can provide in that amount of time, you've lost me. And so that is another thing. And, just be confident and just, the service that you do provide. And then early on when I stated, don't lead with being a diverse supplier. This is your core. This is what I'm good at doing. This is my quality, my customer service. And oh yes, by the way, I am a diverse supplier on top. So those are the 3 things that I would provide as far as advice to our diverse suppliers.
All right. Any other nuggets that you want to drop before we wrap it up?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I guess that's it for me. I don't have no quotes and stuff. No,
you don't have no amazing quote or something that you want to leave, like shine bright or something that you want to.
Oh man, I'll say this because I used it early on. As far as from a leadership standpoint or so forth, or even from internal trying to get support. in my role from inside an organization, people support what they help create. How about that? And what I mean by that is, you give that person the impression that it was their idea and they will support it. So I'll suggest it, but I'll let you take that idea and run with it. So there you go.
See, that was good. That was good.
That's how I've been successful. No, and it really is how I've been successful. I come in and I'm the brand new person, intern, coming off the street from something. I haven't been with the organization 30 years, and there are people that've been there 15 and 20 years. And so for me to come in and create this whole new program and try to change, no, I don't want to change it. I just want to enhance it. So, hey, how about we work together? We're collaborative. We work for the same. We're on the same team. So that's my nugget.
That was
support what they help create.
That was a good one. See, that wasn't so hard. That was actually a good one. I actually like that. That actually works out.
All right.
All right, everybody. We want to say special thanks to our guest today, Miss Natonya Harbison. I appreciate you talking with us today about diversity and all that good stuff. And you stick around. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and I will see you guys on Friday when we have our final 2 interviews. All right.